Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. It's Louise here from Eleanor Grace. I've got a new series of videos I'm going to do for you on couching because I had a few people ask about it. There's so many different types of couching that you can do. I thought it would be better to sort of do it in a smaller block and do a series rather than trying to cram it all into one video. So I've just done a few sort of examples here of some couching, and I just wanted to talk through the basics initially, and then in a week or so I'll release the next one about the stitches. So couching is from the French coucher, which is to lie down, and you can use anything that you want to couch on. It doesn't even particularly, I don't believe, have to be sort of wool or a heavy thread. But the idea is that you are attaching something to your piece with another piece of thread. So the idea is that you perhaps have something slightly heavier that you're sort of pinning down onto the piece. And I've got some examples here, and I've also got some examples of the types of things that I might use. I've been looking through my box of spare bits of wool, and I tend to like really nice sort of proper wool. I'm not mad keen on acrylic, but I have bought a couple of acrylics here, and this one is quite fancy. I'm just going to chop that a bit off that one just to show you, and then a bit of this one which I've pinned down here, and just to show you a couple of things about the basics of couching that you can take with you, and then I'll do a bit more. So this is a piece of Noro, which anyone who knows is the most lovely Japanese yarn, and it goes from thin to thick to thin again, so it can be quite a nice challenge for a bit of couching. So I've couched a bit down here, and as you can see it did look like this, so I've couched it down quite tightly here. And couching doesn't have to be a straight line. This I've decided to sort of let it meander as I went along. So it's a nice sort of tidy but a slightly wobbly line, which is what I was going for. Then I've done a very nice straight line here, and I've also shown a couple of techniques here for turning a corner, if you were going to be doing it. So I'll do some more on these later and explain all the ins and outs. Now, technically, with couching, you should always have the ends pushed through and tied away. As you know, I have said many times, I am a bit of a rebel. I don't always want to do exactly what what the books say, and I like to do, my own versions of things. So I've done a mixture here. This top and bottom one I have finished off in the way that you should, and this one here I've let the ends stay on top of the fabric because I just love the sort of it's almost like a pom-pom of this particular yarn. So I've left this on top. Now that is technically a bit of a no-no, but I actually really like the way it looks, and in fact I prefer it to the look of when it's done away neatly like these two. So to give you a little taster, what I did is I used some cotton perlé, so just normal cotton perlé 8 I used because it's just that little bit thicker. Or you could use anything to tie it on, but what you have to bear in mind is how tough your fabric is to get through, because especially if you're putting something very thick through, that can be really hard. So what I tend to do is tend to use slightly thinner things for couching usually, and certainly if you've not done couching before and you want to practice, I would advise to probably use a thinner piece like this. This is the same piece here. This is one of those sort of fancy yarns that's got little bits twiddling here and there. It's quite thin and it's quite easy to tie down, and you can experiment in either doing something in the coordinating, which I've done here, in a coordinating colour, or in a different colour. So here, I mean, this is green, but I've tied it down with a green thread, so it sort of coordinates, but it also gives it a bit of vibrancy. So it depends whether you want to see the stitches very clearly, which is sort of the idea of couching, or whether you want to make it look like the thread has just been placed on top of the piece. And so if you wanted to do that, you would use a color exactly the same as the piece that you're putting through. If you got, for instance, haven't got an example that's exactly the same, but if you'll get the idea. If you wanted to couch a bit more of this, I might use a blue or a darker blue. Actually, I might try and match it to that to get that effect. So what I've done here is I've done, as I say, the finishing technique, which is the proper technique, which I have done on these two, and I've left this one loose, as I said, so you've got those nice floofy edges to it, which I really love. So in order to do tying off on the back, if you're going to do it properly, what you would do is you leave a slightly longer, it'd be a bit longer than this end at the start and at the end, and I will just demonstrate it just briefly. I'm going to do it with the thinner thread because it's going to be easier to place. So let's see if I can get this through in this needle here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a piece along here. So if I was, for instance, going to come up here, this is where it's difficult to get through. It's a bit of a challenge, so you do want to think about the fabric that you're using. I'm using calico here because it's my practice pad, and that's not too bad to pull through, but you do need a bit of welly for it. So what the idea is, if I just go through there again and just pull that through, hopefully it should be slightly easy now. It would help if I was actually doing it the right way around. Let's get it the right way around. So you come in from the back. Get my brain in gear. So there's a couple of ways to do it. There is a technique called the away waist knot, which is one of the sort of proper techniques that you should use for stitching. Anyway, I must admit I don't use that. I tend to knot at the back of my pieces because most of my pieces aren't are used as something that's going to be practical, so you don't see the back, you're going to cover the back. So what I've done here is just left a bit of a length, a bit longer than I need to really, and then I'm just going to place however long the piece of couching is going to be. So say I'm going to go that in through that long, I have to pull through this again, so bear with me a second. There we are. So that's the piece that I'm going to couch. So what I've done, which is a slightly different version of the proper method, is I would then leave that for the moment. I would probably cut this end off just to leave me a bit of give there. And then I would start couching it. And at the end, I will tie off the knots. So what I'm going to do is pick a colour that's hopefully going to stand out. Now this is obviously a thinner thread. This is actually it's a crochet thread, so it's more like a cotton, it's a bit between cotton pearl 8 and 12, I would say. So what you do with the basic technique is you would obviously come in at the back. Now what I could do whilst I'm here is actually tie off that bit so it's secure. So what I'll do is start with a knot in my thread, go into the felt and just overstitch a few times, making sure I'm actually attaching it to the felt and sort of encasing that first bit of the stitch. So I haven't come through at all to the other side. I've just encased the thread here a couple of times. I feel that's actually pretty secure, so I'm going to chop that off now. So it makes for quite a neat back. But as I say, I'm not really one for the rules, so you can do it however you like. If you want to just knot it, you could knot it. But if it is a very bulky piece like this one here, I would think that's not going to work really, because you're going to have a big lump. So I would say either leave it on top like this, or to take it through and just try and stitch it off as I just have on this one here, just to tie down some of the pieces bit by bit. So what we do is we decide where we're going to put our first stitch in, and then ideally with couching you do need to be regular. You do want to put in the stitches at regular intervals. So I'm going to put my first one here, and what I'm doing is just encasing, and what I do is I slightly pull down the piece of that's going to be couched, because I want to get sort of underneath it rather than doing a stitch either side, if you know what I mean. So I pull my needle down a little bit, go through, and you get your first stitch. So hopefully you can see that. It's very, very dark here and stormy today, so I hope you can see. And then I come out along the line, the next place that I'm going to come up and stitch. And again, I'm going to roll this piece down to get in behind it. There we go. And it's as simple as that. That is the basics of couching. But as I say, the main thing is to make sure that your stitches are pretty regular. I've come in slightly early on that one, and you'll see the slight difference in terms of space between them. But you want to sort of plan out how many stitches you want to do, and also whether you want to make it straight or wiggly, because this is the point. Before now I probably would have laid it in a slightly more relaxed way, but this is the point where you could, if you've still got a length of thread at the of yarn at the back, you could pull yourself through a bit more and make it go up and down and wiggle all over the place. But this is the basic way of doing it. So again, I'm going to pull that down slightly, and there we have a reasonably neat row of couching. And as I say, if you have not tried it before and you're a bit nervous, then use something like this, which is a bit thinner. So use a yarn that's not big, bulky, thick one, because you've got to remember at some point you've got to get control of that yarn, and it can be difficult. So I'm going to put one more stitch in here at the end. Pull that down, get in behind it. There we go. And that is just a simple couching line, and you can do many combinations. What I'll do as well at the end, since I'm at the end of the line now, I'm going to take this piece of the couching yarn, and I'm going to enclose that like I did with the other one, so I can tie that off and keep a nice neat back to my work, which, as I say, most of the time I'm not worried about, because it's the way I work, it's usually on something that's going to be backed, and so I'm not too worried as long as it's not too bulky. As I say, you've got to think about that if you're using a very thick thread. And one of the things about couching from history was it was used to put in a bit of glitz, especially for the royals. It was used to put a bit of glitz and glam into their outfits without using a lot of really expensive proper gold and silver thread made from gold and silver. So what they would do is they would couch it in gold or silver thread, and it would give that glitzy appearance, but they're not actually using very much thread. So it was a way of cheapskating, really, on making uh, clothes look really fancy. So what I'll do next, I'll come back with another session, and it will be to show you a different type of couching. So there are many different types of couching. This one is, because of the nature of the thread, as you can see, the yarn here has got this natural weave. So for me, that's the way the stitches would go anyway, because it makes sense. You wouldn't go straight, as I have on these ones. You would want to go with that natural sort of twist in the fibre. And so to do that and to tie it down quite tightly, you get this sort of almost like a bunched, they call it bunched couching, and that's usually done when you have a really nice glitzy sort of thread or yarn that you've doubled up or had 3, 4, 5, 6 threads all together, and when you pull it very tight with your couching stitch, it bunches them into almost looking like sort of peas. And you can see here that I've got that sort of effect there. So I'll do that one next, and then we'll move on to different types. So this one is obviously turning corners and being able to keep control of the yarn that you're couching. And also I'll have a look at other types of stitching, such, you can do it in as I say, in not in straight lines. You can do pendants, you can do all sorts of things. So I'll do another little series on these, but I hope you've enjoyed that sort of basic introduction to couching there. And as I say, I'll come back with another session in a week or so, and hopefully you'll have a good evening, a good afternoon, or a morning if you're in the southern hemisphere, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.